Today's video is about Anglo-Saxon invasion on Britain. The Anglo-Saxons were a group of farmer warriors who lived in Britain over 1,000 years ago, made up of three tribes, and they came from Europe. They were called the Anglo-Saxon and Jute tribes. The two largest were the Anglo and Saxon, which is how we come to know them as the Anglo-Saxon today. They were first people who fought many battles during the rule of Britain. They were also aggressive people, often fighting each other. Each tribe was ruled by its own strong warrior who settled their people in different parts of country. The Anglo-Saxon first tried invading in the 4th century, but the Roman army were quick to send them home because Romans were also fond of fighting against. Years later, around 450 AD, the ancient Romans left. When the Romans left Britain, the Anglo-Saxons seized their chance. They found it as opportunity and got this time they got success. They left their homes in Germany, Netherlands, and Denmark and sailed over to Britain on wooden boats. They were coming from Germany, Netherlands, and Denmark, sailed over to Britain on wooden boats. Many of them were farmers before they came to Britain, and it is thought that they were on the lookout. They were searching for new land as flood waters back home had made almost impossible to farm because their land was full of flood water, and that's why they found it impossible to farm on their land, and that's why they decided to search for new land. The Anglo-Saxons didn't like the stone houses and streets left by the Romans, so they built their own villages. They were fond of living in countryside, that's why they decided to left the Romans things which were made of stones, houses like houses and streets. They looked for land which had lots of natural resources like food, water, and wood to build and heat their homes. And Britain's forest had everything they needed because Britain's forests were very dense and full of resources. They surrounded each village with a high fence to protect cattle from wild animals like foxes and wolves and to keep out their enemies too. We know what Anglo-Saxon houses were like from excavations of Anglo-Saxon villages. Excavations were done on Anglo-Saxon village, and from there we know about what kind of villages in which they were living. They were small wooden huts with a storeroom, and inside was just one room in which the whole family lived, ate, slept, and socialized together, much like an ancient version of living. The biggest house in the village belonged to the chief, which was large enough to house him and all his warriors, and sometimes even the oxen too. Sometimes even her cattle were also sheltered there. It was a long hall with a stone fire in the middle, and hunting trophies and battle armor hung from its wall. There were tiny windows and a hole in the roof to allow smoke to escape. These kind of structures of the house of the chief. Many towns and villages still carry Anglo-Saxon names today, including England. The very name England also came from the one of the three tribes Anglo, and in last it became Angleland. Early Anglo-Saxon villages were named after the leader of the tribe. So everyone you had visited reading in the Anglo-Saxon times, you would have in Radas village being the local chieftain. The Anglo-Saxons settled in many different parts of the country. They settled, like the Jutes ended up in Kent. They settled in Kent. The Angles in East Anglia, and the Saxons in the parts of Essex, Wessex, Sussex, and Middlesex, according to whether they lived east, west, south, or in the middle. Not all Roman towns were abandoned. They didn't abandon all Roman towns, though some chiefs realized that a walled city made for great fortress, so they built their wooden houses into the fortress, making fortress inside the walls of Roman towns like London. Perhaps one of our favorite Anglo-Saxon facts is how much they liked to party. They loved a good meal and would often host huge feasts in the chief's hall. They very much liked huge feast and eating delicious food. Meat was cooked on the fire and they ate bread, drank beer and sang song into the long night. They grew wheat, barley, and oats for making bread and porridge, grew fruit and vegetables like carrots, parsnips, and apples, and kept pigs, sheep, and cattle for the purpose of meat, wool, and milk. They were a very resourceful people. Everything had its use and nothing went to waste. They didn't want anything to be to be wasted. Animals' fat could be used as oil for lamps. Knife handles could be made out of deer antlers, and even glue could be made from cows. Anglo-Saxons made their own clothes out of natural materials. The men wore long-sleeved tunics made of wool or linen, often decorated with a pattern. The trousers were woolen and held up by leather belt from which they could hang their tools such as knives and pouches. Shoes were usually made out of leather and fastened with laces or toggles. The women would wear an underdress of linen or wool and an outer dress like a pinafore called as peplos, which was held onto the underlayer by the two brooches on the shoulder. Anglo-Saxon women loved a bit of bling and often wore beaded necklaces, a manko wale har, you can see, bracelets and rings too. Many of today's Christian traditions came from Anglo-Saxons, but they were not Romans. When they first came over from Europe, they were pagans and worshipped and believed different gods and goddesses who they believed looked different parts of their life. And these gods and goddesses looked different parts of their life, such as family, crop growing, weather, and even war. The Anglo-Saxons would pray to the pagan gods to give them good health, a plentiful harvest, or success in battle. Like us, they also prayed like us when we go to give any examination, we want success, and that's why what we do is that we do pray before our gods and goddesses. It was not until the Pope in Rome sent over a missionary, a monk called Augustine, and this was the first monk who turned many Anglo-Saxon people into Christianity. And he came in 597 AD that the Anglo-Saxon became Christians. Augustine convinced the Anglo-Saxon king Ethelbert of Kent, and this was the first Anglo-Saxon king who turns himself towards Christianity. Mm, and slowly the rest of country followed it. And here I clicked the concept of power and knowledge, which was given by Michel Foucault, and here it fits well because all people imitates or mimics power, and the King Ethelbert was the ruler of the time, and the people of this time followed him. Thank you for today. I will put next part. Stay connected.